Hello, welcome back to 3 Delirium. My name is AJ, and today we're going to talk about how to play Warhammer 40,000. Now, not the rules or interactions with the models and dice rolls made by Games Workshop, but more so how to interact with your opponent even before the game even starts. So, what we have are some models that I found on the internet that I have the 3D file for, and when we look at them, we'll see that they compare a bit drastically with the model that the game is intended to be played with. And if we start with this model, when I compare it to this model, it is a lot smaller but taller. So why would this be something I need to care about, or why would I even bother to give it a second thought? Well, stick around and we will think about that and talk it through. So, why am I worrying about this? What am I actually checking on? Well, what we have is kind of something that I think a previous generation might call a gentleman's agreement. So, it's a method of playing fairly before the game even starts. It's the mindset of going in to play the game in the beginning. So, the gentleman's agreement that I'm talking about in this regard is I want to make sure that I'm not making a model that would be more advantageous than the intended one that Games Workshop makes. So, by that, I would mean, let's take this model, and you can see that its silhouette is tall but skinny. Now, if we compare that to the other model, as we said before, it is more short but wide with the wings and such. If we look at these models from a distance, you would definitely see that they're both set up in exactly the same way. They both have equally as heavy armor for protection. They both have a sword and a pistol, and they both have implements of flight. One has a fancy skinny jetpack, and the other one has great broad wings. But they would go in the same size base. They would fill the same role in the game pieces. They would be worth the same number of fake points that go into building each army that you use in this game. But the problem is when we introduce, sometimes is referred to the third army on the table. So you would have yours, your opponent's, and then the terrain. Now, the terrain is super important. It would make sometimes the difference between whether or not a model can be shot at, or how other models can interact with that model, and even sometimes how that model can interact with the table itself. So, if we take our silhouetted models and we place them on the board, they would always have to interact with terrain. Now, this terrain is not standard sized or anything, but it is a great example of how I'm talking about the problem here. So if we take the tall and skinny model and compare that to the piece of terrain, we can see that it would stick up over the top, and then therefore, my opponent would be able to see it and can interact with it. That's how it would typically be done. So lots of time and money has gone into play testing and double checking in with play testers themselves, the rules writers, the marketing team, everything, the people who build the terrain, the people who build the models themselves. It's measured with each other of how this model would interact with a standard piece of terrain. Now, the problem is these 3D printed files that I found on the internet, a person can sit down in their free time and just pump one out in however long it takes, a weekend, a couple hours, what have you. But it's beautiful, and sadly I've also noticed that when I look for this file again on Thingiverse, where I found it, that it no longer exists. So maybe it was even taken down and isn't out there anymore. But it doesn't have the resources and the time behind it to kind of prove that it's fair to play this model. Just with this mock-up, you can see that with the models, they stick out almost in equal ways, in different ways. So the tall, skinny Games Workshop model is seen above the piece of terrain, but the other model from the internet is seen around the outside of the piece of terrain that would change how it could be seen or not seen. But a gentleman's agreement that I would think of is I would attempt to try to maybe meet halfway. I really like these models. I would like to use them. So maybe if I make the wings smaller and the whole model itself a little taller, I would then be able to use it kind of in the space between the originally intended and this new one. But then we're faced with sometimes doing that, it is even harder to see. This is an example of, in this game, it's the hobby aspect of the game, it's called modeling to advantage. So when I model this particular lady with a jetpack this way, meeting halfway means I'm kind of modeling it to be blocked completely in our scenario with this little piece of terrain in the middle. Well, that's a pain. But in making this little animated part for this video, I do see and realize that making her jetpack smaller and planning to put her on a higher base may not be the best option, because then I will, like I said before, modeling to advantage, and therefore I could be giving myself a bit of a cheating advantage there. But what I've found all in all is you can do all you want to try to uphold some sort of gentleman's agreement. I'm not cheating in that regards, and I'm not cheating by using smaller models than normal or bigger models than normal, but with models that are differently shaped, it really would just come down to a conversation with your opponent, whether that's right before the game and you can show them the differences in your models, or if you're lucky enough to have your next opponent, you can communicate with them well before the game. It's nice to communicate, hey, I've got these models that are different sized, and what do you think about it? But communication will probably trump any gentleman's agreement at any time. But when it comes down to, I guess you could even say, the morality of playing the game, communication is probably the way to solve this. So, what do you think? Do you think this comes down to modeling to advantage? Do you think that printing models for this game in general is a good or a bad idea? Do you think that only the models that can be played are the models purchased from the same company? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you like this video, feel free to hit the like button. But, as always, I will see you next time, where we can all hallucinate about the possibilities of 3D printing here on Free Delirium. I'll see you then.